love the history of Las Vegas. I like it. Old school Las Vegas. A lot of locals here that have been here a long time, they miss it. They miss the Vegas of old. Well, there are a lot of gangsters in Las Vegas back in the day. One of my favorite movies of all time is the movie Casino. Robert De Niro portraying the character of Lefty Rosenthal, and of course Joe Pesci playing the character of Spilatra. And Frank Vincent, the late Frank Vincent, who did a great job, by the way, in The Sopranos. He played Frank Cullotta. And boy, Vegas has a lot of history. There's a lot of bodies buried in the desert. I'll leave it at that. But it was such a fantastic.
Oh yeah, there have to be. There's got to be a lot of houses right now in Las Vegas. Like if you build in Summerlin, that there is a chance that you are building on a dead body. That's like an Indian graveyard type thing. That's got to be a real thing in Las Vegas, in some parts of Vegas.
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot. So the reason why I'm bringing this up because we have a man on the line who actually co-wrote 4 books with Frank Cullotta. Knew him very, very well, and the stories have to be endless. His name is Dennis Griffen, and he joins us right now on the line. And the reason why we're bringing up Frank Cullotta, because he just passed away at the age of 81. Dennis Griffen joins us. Dennis, thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you very much. I appreciate the invitation.
Oh, thank you, Dennis.
Thank you. So, Dennis, can we just start with this? I mean, I know that Cullotta worked with Martin Scorsese in the making of the movie Casino. How real was that movie? Because it appeared to me like it was very, very real and very factually based. What would you say about that?
I would say it was. Of all the crime movies, organized crime movies I've watched, that probably was the most on point, I think, and the most based on fact.
So what are the private conversations you've had with Cullotta? I mean, did he ever just look you in the eye and say, hey, listen, I murdered this many people? I mean, now that he's no longer with us, I don't know what information you can divulge with us, but did he ever talk to you about that? Did you ever get into those deep kind of conversations?
Yes.
Wow.
Over the years, I first talked to Frank by telephone, as a matter of fact, back in 2004. When I was writing my book, The Battle for Las Vegas, The Law versus the Mob, and I wanted to get, I'd been able to reach several retired FBI agents in Las Vegas Metro cops, but I didn't have a mobster. And I was able to get a hold of Frank by telephone, and he gave me a few comments that I added to the manuscript. And then the following year, we conspired on his biography titled Cullotta, and we've been doing business and been friends ever since.
So in the movie Casino, obviously it's Frank Vincent, the late Frank Vincent, who played Frank Cullotta. There's a scene in the movie where it's a brutal murder scene, right, where it was Spilatra that was killed, he and his brother, and it was Frank Cullotta's character, Frank Vincent, who they portrayed it in Casino, that played a role in that murder. So my question to you is, did he ever talk to you about that, and was Frank Cullotta partially responsible for the alleged murder of Spilatra and his brother?
No, Frank did not participate. That was one of the things in the movie that was the Hollywood, more Hollywood than fact.
The spin.
And the murder really took place in a Chicago suburb, the basement of a house in a Chicago suburb. In the movie, they show it taking place in a cornfield. So that was not accurate. The remains were buried in a cornfield.
So it was more...
the actual murder took place. So that was one of the areas in the movie that was definitely fiction.
So it was more like the murder of Joe Pesci's character in Goodfellas, then, in real life?
Yes.
Oh, gotcha.
Gotcha. Okay, so knowing Frank Cullotta, Dennis, as you have over the years, as we mentioned, the stories have to be endless. What are some of the Vegas stories he told you about? Like the way Vegas used to be, right? Run by the mob. Can you go into those conversations about what it was like back in the day when Frank was, one of the big boys in charge of what was going on in a lot of Las Vegas?
Well, if you were in Frank's sphere, the Tony Spilotro, Frank Cullotta types, it was an amazing time to be in Vegas. I mean, they were celebrities. They had people following them around, wanting to socialize, wanting to rub elbows with them. They were real celebrities, and the town was kind of theirs. So it was a great time. I will say one thing that Frank told me, and he told me this several times, is that one of the big differences between the organized crime folks like Frank and others, and there was a lot of families, New York and from all over the country, that did business in Vegas back then. But he said the difference between us and the gangs of today, the street gangs, for example, he said, it was like out of the old saying that we only kill each other. It was business stuff, these hits and assaults. He said now you got these street gangs. He says, and they'll knock somebody off just for an initiation. Somebody they never saw before in their life and is no threat to them. They'll kill them just.
Isn't that interesting?
He made that distinction that there's a big difference between the street gangs of today and the organized criminals that used to operate.
Innocent people didn't get hurt.
Isn't that interesting? And by the way, if you're just joining us, we're speaking with Dennis Griffen, friends with Frank Cullotta. He worked with him with writing 4 books. As right, Cullotta just passed away last week. So isn't it interesting what you're talking about, Dennis? You're saying that to the late Frank Cullotta, they didn't kill people for the thrill of it or because they just didn't like somebody. They murdered people back in the day because it was all about money and business. And he's telling you today he doesn't understand it. People kill people because somebody took a soda from somebody or, I find that to be interesting, and I believe that. What did he make about, I'm just curious because one of my favorite gangster shows of all time was The Sopranos. Did he ever talk to you about that? And did he feel like that show was pretty real from what he lived back in the day?
He thought it was a good show. Yes,
he did.
He likes the Sopranos, and I just wanted to mention. I heard in your intro you're talking about if you're building a house in certain areas, you may be building on a dead body.
Yeah, I said that.
Also, maybe building on a discarded murder weapon. I know Frank distributed a couple of guns out in the desert there.
Wow,
they have them in their backyard as well.
How many murders? Listen, if you can divulge us, how many murders do you think Frank Cullotta either watched or just was there? I'm not even saying he played a role where he did it. How many people do you think Frank Cullotta watched die?
Well, he admitted in his books and so forth to 4.
Wow.
I'm quite sure that not that he participated, but like you say, maybe he was around.
Right.
He didn't participate. I suspect there might have been a little more than that.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but Oscar Goodman was the attorney for Frank Cullotta, Anthony Spilotro, Lefty Rosenthal, etc., who was obviously the mayor of Las Vegas until recently. Now his wife is. Did Cullotta have any interesting stories about Oscar Goodman?
Well, he and Oscar, there was no love lost there. I think that's a safe statement to make. The two men didn't like each other, and Frank felt that Oscar, as an attorney for Tony, that Oscar let too many things build up. In other words, there were a lot of cases, according to Frank, that weren't settled. They were always postponed and delayed. So Frank felt that put Tony under a lot more pressure because all the stuff was hanging over his head, and that also made him more of a threat to the bosses in Chicago because the more stuff that was hanging over Tony's head that could put him in prison for life or perhaps worse, the more chance that Tony would be a candidate to flip and become a government witness. So in Frank's opinion, that the delays and letting the stuff accumulate rather than getting actual dispositions, getting rid of it, may not have been in Tony's best interest.
Understood, and that was also portrayed in the movie Casino as well, whereas Spilotro didn't really get along with Oscar Goodman either. So, Dennis, I'm a big fan of Las Vegas Country Club. Obviously, it has a lot of history there, and I know that Frank Cullotta spent some time there as well. Recall a scene in the movie, which happened in real life, as you know, where a plane landed in the middle of the fairway when they were FBI agents were spying, I guess you could say, on Spilotro. Was Frank Cullotta actually there when that happened? Because in the movie, the character Frank Vincent, who plays the character Frank Cullotta, they were there on that golf course. Did he talk to you about that? Was he there when that happened?
No.
He wasn't. Okay, interesting. So, but was Frank going through that during that period as well, where the FBI was monitoring and there was a ton of surveillance? Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, the FBI and Las Vegas Metro as well, the Intel division of Vegas Metro, they were on these guys 24/7, and it was a real cat and mouse game. And Frank told me that at the time he had the Upper Crust restaurant on Maryland Parkway, and that was where a lot of the guys hung out. And Frank was the owner of the business, and he said we were constantly. He said, for example, on a pleasant evening, they would set out in front at tables out in front of the restaurant. He said, and there was always a Metro or an FBI car, or sometimes both.
Wow.
In the parking lot, eavesdropping and with binoculars, and so they started doing the thing. In fact, it's portrayed in one of the scenes in Casino about where they hold their hands over their mouths kind of to talk because they don't want potential lip readers.
I remember that scene.
Moving.
Sure. I remember that.
That was real.
So,
they actually did that.
So we're talking about, one of the most historic and, in my opinion, one of the best films of all time in Casino. And Frank Cullotta was such a huge part of that, right? Did he ever talk to you about what it was like working with Scorsese and some of the best actors of my lifetime, and Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci and Frank Vincent and Sharon Stone? What did he tell you about that, the making of that movie? I would imagine he was there for a part of it anyway. What did he tell you about that?
Well, Frank was he had one of those tall director's chairs. His chair was right next to Scorsese.
Wow.
And he was there through the whole thing.
Gosh, that's
start
incredible.
To finish. In fact, where Frank appears in several of the scenes near toward the end of the movie, he appears as the hitman. I think there are 4 or 5 murders that he does on the screen there. And originally, they had another actor portraying the hitman. And when Frank observed the scene that they were shooting, he told Scorsese, he says, that's not the way it would come down. He said, that's not the way you do it.
Wow.
Scorsese said, well, he says, since you're the expert, do you want to do it? So that's how
incredible.
Frank ended up getting to portray the hitman. There were several murder scenes that took place.
I'm just trying to picture this, Dennis, what you just said. So you're telling me that, he's on the set. We're talking about the real Frank Cullotta, and he's sitting there right next to Martin Scorsese, and in the middle of the scene, he's saying, Martin, listen, you're not killing these people right. That's not how I did it. And then Scorsese.
Exactly. That's just the way it came down. Yeah.
And then Scorsese looks at him and says, well, maybe we should just have you do it then, since you actually did these murders. To me, that is so incredible. That is such an incredible story. And you know what? To the testament of the movie, that's why the movie was so great. I have no doubt, because Frank was a part of this, and it was so real. You know what I mean? I think that's what makes the movie so genuine, and it's incredible. I wanted to ask you, Dennis, before we let you go, do you have any new books coming out that you'd like to talk about? Anything new that you've written, whether it be about Frank or anything else that you'd like to talk about?
A couple, as a matter of fact.
Great.
Both related to Frank, actually. The last joint project Frank and I did, we completed recently, and I never thought I'd be involved with this, but it's a cookbook. Frank loved to cook. So he wrote a cookbook, and the title of it is Frank Cullotta's Greatest, (kitchen hits).
I love it. That's great.
Dennis, did he ever cook for you?
He never cooked for me. He treated me to a few dinners, but he never cooked for me.
That is incredible.
It's quite a book. It's at the publishers now, and Frank insisted. I talked to Frank several times. His health deteriorated,
right?
And he said no matter what, he wanted to make sure that book got out. So
wow,
it's at the publishers. Hope to see it out in a couple of months. Frank Cullotta's Greatest Kitchen Hits, and another manuscript I just finished. I finished it a couple of months ago. Is called The Informant. And with all the books I wrote with Frank and all the research I did, I thought I knew everything about that era in Las Vegas that there was to know.
Right.
So I was very surprised. Frank was running tours. He was doing tours, taking people on tours of, where a lot of the action that was depicted in Casino actually took place. And he called me one morning, And he said, guess who was on my tour last night? And I said, who? So he gave me a guy's name, and I says, well, you got me. I said, I don't know who he is. Who is this guy? He said, well, he's the informant that helped bring us down.
Wow.
I said, what? He said, yeah. He said, this guy was an informant. He said he started out as a tipster for us. He was providing information to us about scores we could make and a lot of drug dealers where we could knock off the drug dealers. And he said he ended up working for started out with Las Vegas Metro as an informant. They turned him on to the federal prosecutors.
Wow.
So he said his information led to a bust where they busted me, he said, which would have made me a third-time, persistent felon. He said, so
Sure.
I've been looking at life in prison.
Oh my gosh! Wow, that is unbelievable. So
I said, well, Frank, I said, I wish I'd have been a fly on the wall, to be on this tour with you and this guy.
Right.
I mean, you haven't seen him in 38 years or whatever. I said, and all of a sudden he shows up and you take him around. And he said, yeah. And he said, but the thing is, he wants to write a book and tell the story. He said it's never been told before. So he said,
wow.
would
That's
you be
incredible.
interested in writing it with him? So that's the manuscript I just finished.
Well, I can't wait. I can't wait until that comes out and I read it, and we'd gladly have you back on again. Dennis, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing these incredible stories. They really are unbelievable, and I know our older listening audience will appreciate them, I would hope, as much as I do and you do. It's really incredible. Dennis, I'd love to have you on again down the road. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing these stories about Frank Cullotta. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.